The story of Caleb, a biblical figure from the Old Testament, is a powerful tale of faith, courage, and obedience. Caleb was one of the 12 spies sent by Moses to explore the land of Canaan before the people of Israel could take it as their inheritance, as part of God's promise to Abraham and his descendants. Historical context. After the Israelites were freed from slavery in Egypt and led by Moses toward the Promised Land, the previous generation showed a lack of faith in God's promises. In the account of Numbers 13 and 14, Moses sent 12 spies to investigate the land of Canaan. When they returned, 10 of the spies brought back a frightening report about the giants who inhabited the land, causing the people to fear and doubt God's ability to fulfill his promise. However, Caleb, along with Joshua, was one of the 2 spies who fully trusted in God's promises and saw the giants not as an impossible threat, but as obstacles that, with God's help, would be defeated. Caleb, a warrior of faith. Caleb stood out for his courage and faith. In Numbers 13:30, he stood before the people and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession of it, for we are well able to overcome it." While the other spies were overcome with fear and pessimism, Caleb maintained his confidence that God would give them the victory, as he had witnessed God's power throughout their journey in the desert. However, the people did not listen to Caleb and Joshua, and instead of trusting in God's promise, they rebelled and asked to return to Egypt. As a result, God decreed that that generation would not enter the Promised Land, and the Israelites would wander in the desert for 40 years until they died, leaving only the younger generation to take the land. The fulfilled promise. Even though Caleb was part of the people who experienced the unbelief of others, he and Joshua were the only ones who, due to their unshakable faith, were rewarded with entry into Canaan. In Joshua 14 verses 10 to 12, when Caleb was 85 years old, he approached Joshua and reminded him that he had followed God with all his heart, and according to God's promise, the land was his. Despite his advanced age, Caleb was not afraid of the giants who still inhabited the mountainous region. With firm faith, he asked to be given the land that God had promised him, confident that he could take it with God's help. Caleb said, "Now therefore, give me this mountain which the Lord spoke of in that day. For you heard in that day how the Anakim were there, with great and fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said." His faith gave him the strength to conquer that land, and God blessed him with victory, just as he had promised. Lessons from Caleb's story. Faith in God's promises. Caleb is an example of how to trust God even when circumstances seem impossible. His faith was unshakable, and although he faced giant obstacles, he believed that with God's help, anything was possible. Courage and boldness. In a world filled with fear and uncertainty, Caleb teaches us to stand firm and be courageous, no matter how big or intimidating the challenges we face. Persistence and patience. Although Caleb was faithful to God from the beginning, he had to wait 40 years to see the fulfillment of the promise. His patience and trust that God would fulfill what he had promised are examples of how we should live our faith during times of waiting. Leadership and commitment. Caleb was not only a leader who trusted in God's promises, but he also inspired others to hold onto their faith. His dedication to God and his word made him stand out as a man of integrity and worthy of being an example. Conclusion. The story of Caleb is an inspiring account of how unwavering faith can move mountains. Despite the giants he faced, both physical and spiritual, Caleb trusted that God was with him, and that faith led him to conquer the Promised Land. In a world where challenges may seem insurmountable, Caleb's story reminds us that no matter how great the obstacles, faith in God can overcome them.